On a silent night, when the world stood still and the city seemed to stop breathing, a young woman stood alone. She stared into the darkness, unsure of where she belonged anymore. She carried a heart as vast as the ocean, yet her life had been narrowed by decisions made by others. No one asked if she was ready. No one cared if she was strong enough. That night, a life-changing decision was made. Without her consent, one name was chosen. One life was handed over, without love, without choice. By morning, she would become a bride, married to a man she did not choose, a man confined to a wheelchair, not because she wanted this life, but because she was chosen to pay for someone else's mistake. Morning arrived without mercy. She woke before the sun, her body heavy, as if the night had never truly ended. For a moment, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, hoping just for a second that everything had been a bad dream. But the weight in her chest reminded her it was real. Today, her life would change. She rose quietly from the bed, careful not to wake anyone. In that house, silence was safer than questions. She moved through the narrow hallway, her bare feet cold against the floor, passing walls that had heard years of arguments, broken promises, and apologies that meant nothing. In the kitchen, she began preparing breakfast, repeating motions her hands knew by heart. Chop, stir, serve. She had done this for as long as she could remember, not because she enjoyed it, but because she was good at disappearing into responsibility. As the house slowly woke, voices filled the air. Familiar voices, heavy voices. They talked about money, about debts that never seemed to shrink, about problems that somehow always landed on the same shoulders. No one looked at her. No one asked how she slept. No one asked how it felt to give up a future she never had the chance to imagine. She set the plates on the table and stood quietly to the side, listening. She had learned long ago that being quiet kept the peace. And in this family, peace mattered more than her heart ever did. After breakfast, the house did not return to silence. It filled with tension, the kind that lingered in the air, even when no one spoke. She washed the dishes slowly, listening to the muffled voices coming from the other room. At first, she tried not to listen, but her name was mentioned. Once, then again. Her hands froze in the water. She could hear her mother's voice, low and anxious. Her father's voice followed, heavy with anger and exhaustion. And then, another name. Her brother's, the golden child, the one who was always forgiven, the one whose mistakes never truly became his own. She stood there, water dripping from her fingers, as the truth slowly took shape. He had done it again. A debt, bigger than before, dangerous this time. The kind of trouble that could not be solved with apologies or borrowed money. Her mother cried. Her father cursed his fate. And her brother said nothing. He stared at the floor, waiting for someone else to fix what he had broken. That was when she understood. This marriage was not a coincidence. It was a solution, a transaction, a way to erase a problem. By sacrificing the one person who never fought back, her chest tightened, but she did not cry. She had learned that tears changed nothing. She dried her hands, took a deep breath, and stepped away from the sink. Soon, they would call her in, and when they did, her life would no longer be hers. They called her name softly, as if kindness could soften what they were about to do. She walked into the room with steady steps, though her legs felt weak beneath her. Everyone was there. Her parents, her brother. No one met her eyes. She stood in the center, feeling smaller with every second. That passed in silence. Her father spoke first. He talked about responsibility, about family honor, about sacrifices that had to be made. When times were hard, her mother followed, her voice trembling, explaining how this marriage would solve everything. Debts would disappear, problems would be buried, and the family could finally breathe again. No one asked her opinion. No one explained why her life was the price. She looked at her brother, hoping just for a moment that he would speak, that he would say something, anything. But he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor, his guilt hidden behind shame. The That silence answered every question she had. The decision had already been made. She was not there to choose. She was there to agree. Her throat tightened as she finally spoke. Her voice was barely audible. "Do I have a choice?" The room fell silent. Then her father sighed, long and tired. "This is for the family," he said. And just like that, her future was sealed. She lowered her head, feeling something inside her break. Not loudly, quietly, the way things always broke in her life. The meeting was arranged quickly, as if delaying it might give her time to change her mind. That afternoon, she followed her parents to a house she had never seen before. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made her heart beat louder with every step she took. They led her into a living room that felt cold despite the daylight, and that was when she saw him. He sat near the window, his back straight, his hands resting calmly on his lap. A wheelchair stood beneath him, real, unavoidable. Her breath caught in her throat. This was not a rumor. This was not something exaggerated. This was her future. He looked up when she entered. Their eyes met for the first time. There was no anger in his gaze. No pity, only a quiet awareness, as if he already knew. She had not come by choice. Her parents exchanged polite words with his family, speaking of arrangements and dates, as if they were discussing a simple transaction. She remained standing, unsure where to look, unsure how to breathe. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, low. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. She looked at him, surprised. "I know this isn't what you wanted." The room seemed to disappear. No one had said those words before. No one had acknowledged her fear. For the first time that day, her eyes burned, but she said nothing. Because even now, she was not sure she was allowed to feel relieved. They left her alone with him for a moment, calling it privacy, though it felt more like a test. She stood near the door, unsure whether she should sit or keep her distance. He was the one who spoke again. "You can sit," he said gently. She hesitated, then took the chair across from him, keeping her hands folded in her lap. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was different here. Not heavy, just careful. He broke it first. "I didn't ask for this either," he said. She looked up, startled. He did not avoid her gaze. "They came to me with an offer," he continued. "A solution to a problem." His mouth curved into a faint, bitter smile. I recognized that look immediately. She understood what he meant. She had seen it before. The look people had when they believed your life was expendable. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "If you hate me, I'll understand." Her chest tightened. She shook her head slowly. "I don't hate you," she said. Her voice trembled, but the words were honest. For a brief moment, something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people standing on opposite sides of the same wound. Outside the room, voices returned. Footsteps approached. Their moment ended, and reality rushed back in, reminding her that understanding alone was not enough to change her fate. The engagement was announced quietly. No celebration, no joy, just a decision delivered, as if it had always been inevitable. From that day on, her life began to shrink, not suddenly, slowly, like a door closing 1 inch at a time. She was expected to learn new routines, new responsibilities, to prepare herself to become someone's wife, before she had ever learned how to be herself. Her family watched closely, every movement, every word, as if obedience now needed proof. She smiled when asked to smile. She nodded when spoken to. She agreed, even when her chest felt tight, and her thoughts screamed no. At night, when the house finally slept, she lay awake, staring into the darkness. She wondered how long a person could endure without breaking, and whether breaking would even be noticed. Sometimes, she thought of him, of the way he spoke without cruelty, of the way he looked at her, as if he saw the weight she carried. It frightened her, because hope, even a small one, felt dangerous. She had learned that expecting kindness only made disappointment sharper, so she buried it, just like she buried everything else. Her questions, her fear, and the quiet wish that someone, just once, would choose her instead of using her. The pressure became heavier as the wedding day drew closer. Expectations followed her everywhere. What she should say, how she should behave, what kind of wife she was expected to become. No one asked what she wanted. They only reminded her of what she owed. One evening, her body finally gave in. It started with dizziness. Then the room spun, and the floor felt too far away. She sat down slowly, pressing her palm to her chest, waiting for the tightness to pass, but it didn't. Her breathing became shallow, her hands trembling. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to cry, not loudly, just enough to let the pain escape her body. No one noticed. The house continued its routine, unaware that something inside her was collapsing. Later that night, she received a message. It was from him. A simple question. "Are you all right?" She stared at the screen for a long time. That question felt heavier than all the demands placed on her that day, because it was the first time someone had asked without expecting anything in return. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say she was tired, scared, and slowly disappearing. But instead, she typed one word, yes. And as she turned off her phone, she wondered how long she could keep lying, not to others, but to herself. The days that followed passed in a blur. She moved through them, like someone walking underwater, aware of everything, yet disconnected from it all. At night, sleep rarely came, and when it did, it carried dreams she could not remember, and a heaviness that lingered into morning. She stopped eating properly. Food lost its taste. Her body grew weaker, but no one seemed to notice. Or perhaps they noticed and chose not to care. One afternoon, she visited him again. This time, without their families hovering nearby, he noticed immediately the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she held her cup. "You don't have to pretend here," he said softly. The words broke something open. She looked away, her vision blurring, and for a moment, she struggled to breathe. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered. It was the first time she had admitted it aloud. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty comfort. When she finished, he spoke carefully, as if each word mattered. "There are things you don't know about me," he said. "About this marriage." She looked at him startled. "I accepted it. For a reason," he continued. "And if you're going to walk into this with me, you deserve the truth." She held her breath, because something in his voice told her that what he was about to say would change everything. He took a slow breath before he began, as if preparing himself to reopen an old wound. "I wasn't always like this," he said quietly. She watched him closely, afraid to interrupt. "There was an accident," he continued. "Years ago." A pause followed, long enough for the words to settle between them. He told her about the night. Everything changed, about a reckless decision that was not entirely his own, about someone else who should have been held responsible, but never was. He spoke of hospitals, of months that blurred together, of learning how to live again, in a body that no longer obeyed him. "When people realized I would never walk again," he said, "they stopped seeing me as a man. I became a burden, a problem to manage." She felt a familiar ache in her chest. His words mirrored her own life, more than she wanted to admit. "When your family came to me," he went on, "I understood immediately. They didn't come with respect. They came with desperation." He looked at her then, his eyes steady. "They offered you as a solution." The room felt suddenly smaller. "I said yes," he admitted. "Not because I wanted a wife, but because I knew what it meant to be sacrificed for someone else's mistake." Silence filled the space between them. She realized then that neither of them had truly been chosen. They had both been used, and for the first time, she wondered if two broken choices could somehow protect each other from breaking further. After that conversation, something between them shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough for her to feel it. In the quiet moments, she began visiting him more often. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in silence, sharing space without pressure. It was strange how comforting that silence felt. He never asked her to be anything more than what she was. He never demanded smiles, never reminded her of what she owed. When she looked tired, he noticed. When she grew quiet, he waited. It was the kind of patience she had never been given before. Slowly, she found herself breathing easier in his presence, laughing, softly, carefully, at small things, and each time she did, guilt followed, as if allowing herself even a moment of relief was a betrayal to the pain she was expected to endure. Outside his home, reality remained unchanged. Her family grew more demanding. Preparations intensified. Reminders came daily of how much was riding on her obedience. One night, as she prepared to leave, he spoke again. "If you change your mind," he said carefully, "I won't stop you." She froze. No one had ever offered her an exit before. "I won't force you into a life you don't want," he continued, "even if it costs me." Her eyes burned, not from sadness this time, but from the weight of being seen. She realized then that the hardest part was not being trapped. It was being given a choice after living so long without one. The tension finally broke a few days before the wedding. Her brother returned home late that night, his face pale, his movements rushed and careless. Trouble had followed him again. Bigger this time. Louder, voices rose behind closed doors. Accusations flew. Fear filled the house like smoke. And once again, her name surfaced as the answer. Her parents turned to her with the same familiar look. Expectation, urgency, as if her life were a shield, meant to absorb every impact. "You must not hesitate now," her father said. "Everything depends on this marriage." Her mother's eyes pleaded, but the words carried no comfort. "If this fails," she whispered, "we will lose everything." Something inside her hardened. For the first time, the fear was not stronger than the anger. She thought of the man who had offered her a choice, of the quiet respect she had been given without asking. "What about me?" she asked suddenly. The room fell silent. They stared at her, stunned. She had never spoken like this before. "What happens to me after everything is paid for?" No one answered, because the truth was too uncomfortable to say aloud. Her brother finally spoke, his voice low, filled with guilt too late to matter. "Just this once," he said. "Please." She looked at him and realized something painful. This would never be the last time. There would always be another mistake, another sacrifice, and it would always be her. She took a slow breath. For the first time in her life, she did not answer immediately, and in that hesitation, the future began to shift. That night, she did not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the darkness slowly fade, wondering how many mornings she had lived for others instead of herself. When the house finally grew quiet, she made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, just a steady resolve, forming in her chest. Before dawn, she went to see him. He was surprised when she arrived so early, concern immediately crossing his face. She told him everything, about her brother's return, about the new trouble, about the pressure closing in again. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice calm, but firm in a way she had never heard before. "They will not use you again," he said. She looked at him, startled. "I will speak to them," he continued, "not as a solution, but as your husband." Fear and relief collided inside her. "You don't have to do that," she said quickly. "I know," he replied, "but I choose to." Those words settled deep within her. Choose. No one had ever used that word in connection with her before. Later that day, he confronted her family. There were no raised voices, no threats, just clear boundaries. He refused additional demands, refused further sacrifices. "This marriage ends the debt," he said, "not her life." For the first time, her parents had nothing to argue with. The agreement they had relied on was no longer theirs to control. As they left, she felt something unfamiliar. Not freedom, not yet, but protection, and it was enough to make her believe that the ending might not be as cruel as she had feared. The wedding day arrived without celebration. No music filled the air. No laughter followed her steps. Only quiet acceptance, and a room full of people pretending this was happiness. She stood beside him, her hands steady, though her heart was still learning how to beat without fear. When she looked at him, he met her gaze calmly, not as an owner, not as a savior, but as someone standing beside her, not above her. The vows were spoken, simple words, honest ones. When it was over, nothing magical happened. The world did not change. Her family did not suddenly understand her. Pain did not disappear overnight, but something inside her shifted. That night, as they sat together in quiet exhaustion, he spoke softly. "You're not a burden here," he said. "You never were." She did not cry. She simply breathed. For the first time in a long while, her breath felt like her own. The future remained uncertain. There would be challenges, difficult days, moments of doubt. But for the first time, she would not face them alone. And maybe that was what love truly was. Not rescue, not sacrifice, but two broken lives, choosing, every day, not to break each other further.